minutes after the hour being the 5 o'clock one for a Monday, April the 28th, 1997. A very good afternoon to you, fun seekers. Good afternoon indeed. I, of course, am Lassiter, therefore I must be magnificent. I am. And I am also a bald-faced liar. I've been trying to hide this now for almost 4 months. There isn't any getting around it any longer. I'm assisted this afternoon by the usual cast of characters. There's, what's-his-face on the other side of the glass over there. His counterpart, this side of the glass over here, what's his name?
That would be
Flounder. And I am assisted this afternoon by the woman I've been assisted by for 4 months now that I've tried to hide.
Your gardener.
I'm assisted by Dr. Laura. There's no getting around it. Dr. Laura, how are you this afternoon?
Just fine, Bob, and how are you?
Excellent. Any words of wisdom?
Take on the day.
Take on the day. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Laura. So I'll be turning the show over to Dr. Laura if you have any bizarre problems. For example, if you, wear diapers under your suit or something like that and it's troubling you, you can call in and chat with Dr. Laura. She'll try to help you out. Oh, my God. My God. By the way, I want to do a little experiment today. I want to do one of these shows in a word, although I have 3 words. You pick which one. I'll get into that a little bit later on because I am in a state of shock. I'm in an absolute state of shock. There are times when I think I'm one of the smartest people on the face of the earth. There are times when I think I really have my thumb on the pulse of the nation, of the world, of the universe. There are other times when I feel like I don't have a clue. I just don't have a clue as to what's going on or anything else about it. Speaking of a pulse, I had to go to that miserable doctor today. Jeez, God. And, of course, the only reason he wants to drag me in there is to draw copious amounts of blood from me, far, far more than they would need for any kind of testing. I think he's selling it.
How many vials did they take today?
3.
Wow.
And they had to stick me 3 times before they could get any blood out of me. The third and final time, it was my wrist. I've never had blood taken from my wrist before. Jesus. And then what's even worse, it's not being stuck, it's not the mild discomfort, because it's not that bad. It's not pleasant, but it's not that bad. It's the person doing it, gets embarrassed. Oh, I don't know, and I don't understand. I've never had trouble like this before. Here, let me stick you again. And, it even got to the point where, if you don't want me to stick you again, you could go right down to, the Smith-Kline Labs. No, just stick it. Just do it.
You told her to stick it?
Take a razor blade if you have to and a Dixie cup. I don't care. Just let's get this over with. Oh, God. And there's, of course, Doctor just dancing around. He's dancing around the offices. See, I have this bizarre relationship with my doctor. If I go in there and I'm feeling good and the blood sugar's down and all that kind of stuff, this man gets despondent. I mean, just absolutely despondent. Any other doctor in the world, his joy, his whole reason for being is to cure his patients, right? Not my doctor. No, my doctor, he becomes ecstatic if the blood sugar's too high, if they can't get blood out of me, if my foot falls off, much like Lou. Dr. Lahr. And if I'm doing well, he's depressed. But today he's dancing around in his little white doctor's coat and, Jesus. You have to come back next week. You have to come back next week. And he's sitting there leafing through Mercedes catalogs and... But anyway, I'm getting way ahead of myself. As I said, there are times when I feel I really know what's going on. There are other times when I feel as though I do not have a clue.
Is today a clueless day? Is that what you're getting up to here?
Today is a clueless day, and I'm telling you, today, you can circle today on your calendars. Today it marks the official beginning, the undeniable official beginning of the end for much of life as we know it in this town, on this planet.
That sounds pretty dire.
Have you been listening to Art Bell?
No. Has he had any good shows recently?
Oh, yeah, about the end of the world coming.
Yeah? When's that? Does he have a date?
January 16th in the year 2000.
January 16th in the year 2000. I'll bet you Nicola's contract expires January 15th in the year 2000. But anyway, let's see. Where the hell do I go from here? Well, of course, we have the volunteer thing, the volunteer summit. So in the spirit of the president and in the spirit of the past presidents and in the spirit of the nation and the direction in which we are headed, we are going to ask you to join the volunteer summit campaign, and we'll do the show today in the spirit of that by asking you to volunteer good calls, which only seems reasonable to me.
It's the least you can do for your country.
It's the least you can do for your country. It's the least you can do for your community. It's the least you can do for me. And I'll even give you the telephone numbers, although I haven't really started the show at all. 990-WFLA in Hillsborough, and if you volunteer a lot, I won't have to start the show. 990-WFLA in Hillsborough. In Pinellas, 461-WFLA, 461-WFLA. The GTE Mobile Net Star line, 970-STAR. The Delaware Savings toll-free worldwide web line. What a joke. 1-800-969-WFLA. Now, they're all the numbers.
We might have a prize for the first caller, too.
We might? Like what?
I'm just saying.
Nobody told me anything.
The phones will light up.
Oh, Jesus, flounder.
I said we might.
God. If you want to help me, why don't you go, work for DOA?
Okay.
Oh, okay. There goes Flounder. Bye. Bye, Flounder. It was nice to know you, dude. Hey, take care.
Later. Bye.
990-WFLA Hillsborough, 461-WFLA Pinellas.
People say I'm a lion at heart, but they don't know what I am. People say that I stand apart, but they just don't understand. Every night when the darkness falls, I'll be there at your beck and call. I'm a fool for you, baby. I'm a fool right now. I'm a fool for you, baby. I'm a fool in love.
23 minutes after the hour of 5 o'clock.
970WFLA.com is our website, and you can email us at newsradio@970WFLA.com. It's got real audio, so you can listen at work, too, if you want.
Listen at work.
Well, if you
I can bring a radio with them, and it's a hell of a lot cheaper than a computer, and besides, the sound is much better.
Yeah, if you can't hear it inside your building.
So you kick the window out and hang a coat hanger or something out the window.
Okay, do that.
Okay. It's a lot cheaper. 990-WFLA Hillsborough, 461-WFLA Pinellas. Jack on the Star line. Jack, you're on the air at 970 WFLA.
All right, what's the prize for being the first caller?
Yeah, okay, smartass. What's the prize?
I said there might be a prize.
You can't jerk the audience around about prizes, Flounder.
And there might not be. I said there might be, and there isn't. But you did call, and I thank you for it. You've won our undying gratitude.
Flounder's undying gratitude. That's what you've won. You've taken the time and trouble.
Jack, you can have my undying gratitude, too.
Yeah, Dr. Laura's on
that's worth something. Well, what's the prize?
Tell him to take on the day.
Oh, now we're going to take on the evening. That's what we're going to do.
Oh, okay, take on the evening. Yes, yes.
Have fun.
Okay, you
Later.
too. Yeah, there he goes.
Sucker.
Alan in Tampa. Alan, you're on the air 970 WFLA.
Hey, I want to ask Flounder how come he, whenever he talks to you or you were talking back to him, and as soon as you get on him, he backs down like he's going into a shell.
Oh, that's because he's a turtle, sir.
I just wanted to verify it, I get a kick out of listening to you guys every day.
Well, thanks, dude.
Every day. If I can't listen to you guys, then my radio's got to be broke.
Well, you just keep listening to us until Dick Morris comes on.
No, that's when I'll hang up. No, listen, Dr. Laura's pretty cool, too.
Dr. Laura's pretty
Alan.
cool.
Dr. Laura, are you going to have your own station again today? Or did I miss you today?
No, we're just continuing the show on toward the evening hours.
Oh, okay. Okay, because I like to hear the callers when they call in with some of these ridiculous questions. And they give you the whole life history, and it wasn't even what they called up for.
Did you have a question, Alan?
No, I don't. I'm fine. Everything is stable with me.
Oh, that's what you think.
Well, thanks a lot, Dr. Laura. Take care.
Hey, no problem.
Bye-bye.
Okay, excuse me a moment, please. I'll be right back.
Where are you going?
I
Well,
think
just a...
bang his head against the thing.
Okay, on your mark.
1,
Get set.
2,
Get ready.
3.
Go. Ah! Oh, my God. Oh, my
knock
God,
your
that felt
glasses
good. I'll do another one, yeah. Ready, set, go. Ah! Ah, yes.
Does he do this at home,
Okay,
too?
puts everything in proper perspective. Okay. You see that last caller, without knowing it, actually touched on a very, very touchy issue. And he actually put the whole damn thing in focus when he said, I like to listen to her wacky callers, or whatever it was, but it was, I like to listen to her blank callers. Let's go to John in Tampa. John, you're on the air 970 WFLA.
Hey, Bob, how are you doing?
Oh, fair to Midland, dude.
Good, sir. I wanted to know were you okay after that phone call you received this morning about 9:15?
Didn't bother me at all. I suppose that Larson won't recover, and I'm sure that Jeff won't recover for many, many, many years to come. It was a classic example of, when I tell you guys, be real careful when you are, confronting a so-called celebrity in his own private world, because you just don't know what you're running into. And strangely enough, Larson didn't realize that, and his board operator, Jeffy, didn't realize that, and I'm sure that neither of them will ever pull that stunt again.
Yeah, he sounded rather surprised by your reaction.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really? Well,
What happened? What'd you do?
let's call him at home when he's not expecting it and see what his reaction is.
What did happen this morning?
Well, the phone rings. I'm on my way up the steps, so I would normally pick up the phone because it's like 9:15. The bond market's been open for 45 minutes, as have the currencies. The stock market's getting ready to open, and of course there's always the overnight trade in Project A on the grains to consider. And when my phone rings at that time of the morning, I normally assume it's my broker with some type of dire news that requiring a decision that I have to make to protect my finances.
Right.
And I find out that it's Larson on the other end of the phone. So I pick up the phone and I say, yes, hello. And of course, they don't have me punched up. I'm on hold. I don't even know this because I have no idea what in the hell's going on. So I'm sitting there starting to feel like a fool hollering, hello, hello. And Larson's not smart enough to punch up the call. And he's sitting on the other end hollering, hello, hello. And then finally comes on the air with his cockamamie story about tasty cakes or something like that. Goddamn bond market's going to hell in a handbasket. I've got a big position. I don't care about stupid tasty cakes.
Well, that's not
moron.
like you. I mean, tasty cakes they rule with you.
Not during trading hours, they don't. Fool. Idiot, moron.
So you dismissed him summarily, is that what
summarily, yes. That's basically it.
Dr. Laura?
Yes.
I wanted to see also, I work at the university, and we might be interested in possibly trying to get you to come speak at the university. Do you ever do any local speaking engagements here?
Well, I do. We would have to work it out through my agent, though.
Okay.
She's very expensive.
Not as expensive as you might think.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that we can work something out.
Just make sure that the food's kosher and the room doesn't stink.
So can you put me on hold and maybe give me information, maybe?
Sure. Let's go to this place. 5:40 is the time.
The Bruce Williams Show coming up at 9 p.m. on 970 WFLA.
God, you can't get anything right. If you come in and do your work, prepare that kind of stuff, we wouldn't have embarrassing things like at 9 a.m. Now, some poor little old lady is going to tune in tomorrow morning, and she's going to be hearing, faggots or this, faggots or that. And she's going to blame poor Bruce Williams for this, who, of course, is a well-known lover of faggots. 990W. Oh, isn't he? Do I misspeak or something? Did I misspeak?
Yeah.
I don't think I did. 990 WFLA in Hillsborough, 461 WFLA in Pinellas. This is going to be, I'm going to end up talking to you people tonight. I know I'm going to end up talking to you. Paul on the star line. Paul, you're on the air at 970 WFLA.
I can't.
Good afternoon to you.
What?
Good afternoon to you.
And a good afternoon to you too, Paul.
I have a question for Dr. Laura.
Question for Dr. Laura, sure.
How are you, Paul?
And how you doing?
Good.
Good. Just need an answer to something that's been bugging me for like 5 years.
What's that?
I was divorced, met a lady, totally different than my ex-wife. We got engaged. Did everything for her, really, put like 150% in the relationship. I got my ring back 3 times.
How much did she put into the relationship?
Probably, I don't know. It's really hard to say. Sometimes it was 100%, then it went flat down to 0. It was just one of those things. She lived with me, moved out, moved in, moved out. We were going to get married. She got a wedding dress, and at the last minute, she backed out. She got married to a gentleman. I gave it about a month. It lasted 23 days. She came back to me again.
Why did you take her back?
Because I thought she was a wonderful lady, and she really needed some help, and I tried to get it for her. I was deeply in love with her, and I thought there was always a chance that maybe it would change. But this is
You know people don't really change that much, though.
I guess not. I guess not. But I haven't seen her now in about 4 months, and she went back to her second ex-husband for a while. But everybody out there tells me that to be ready because she's going to try to come back to me again when things go sour.
Well, to be ready, I think what you ought to do is prepare yourself to tell her to go away.
That's been done many times, but keep hitting that little button, you know?
Well, you're going to have to be more forceful. That's it. The straw that broke the camel's back. She's done.
I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, nice talking to you.
You too, Paul.
Listen to your show, and love you, Mr. Lassiter.
I'm going to commit suicide. Jennifer on the star line.
Maybe you
Jennifer,
should
you're
talk
on the
to
air
Dr. Laura
970
about
WFLA. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
I'd like to speak with Dr. Laura.
Sure.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good. Listen, I have this problem. I've got this friend. You know, I have a boyfriend and everything, and this friend's a guy. And he keeps just coming on, and he won't back off, and I don't know what to do about it.
You mean he's coming on to you?
Yeah.
And he's just a friend?
Yeah, and I want to have a good friendship with him and everything, but he just will not back down.
Was he getting physical with you?
No.
Well, I think it's time to just sit him down and have a real long talk with him, and if he doesn't stop you...
Every time we sit down to talk, he just stares at my boobs.
Well, that's unacceptable. Now, you know, if you can say no to that. You know, if the guy, he's not being your friend if he's not going to respect your wishes.
You think so?
Yeah.
So you think I need to just dump him?
Well, yeah.
Or start wearing baggy sweaters.
But I like Flounder.
Oh, so it's Flounder.
I don't know any
Dump him.
Jennifers.
Go ahead, dump him.
Okay.
I think you ought to just do the
Laura.
guy. Get it over with.
990 WFLA in Hillsborough. I'm going to commit suicide. 990 WFLA in Hillsborough. 461 WFLA in Pinellas. By the way, I did want to, before we do anything else today, I did want to say that if ever I have been to a radio station promotion, I was at one on Saturday. Never, ever, ever, ever have I been to a better promotion than the Cigar Fest promotion on Saturday. It was just absolutely phenomenal. See, here's what happened. There really is no such thing as Cigar Fest, okay? Cigar Fest is something that we created. It's a sales thing, you know? It's not like this was the 27th annual Cigar Fest and we were part of it. No, we put the whole damn thing together. And, of course, as you may recall, there was a monsoon on Saturday, so the Cigar Fest was washed out. Well, all the young people in the sales department who worked so very, very hard on this, and they really did, were just absolutely devastated as well as drenched. And so they did the only thing they could possibly do. Of course, they called it off, sent the tents and the tables and the loudspeakers and whatever the hell else they had planned for Cigar Fest, sent it all back to the warehouse, and then they took themselves down to Sparky's in downtown Tampa to lick their wounds. Somewhere shortly before noon, my phone rang, which is, of course, an incredibly unusual thing, especially considering Larson wasn't on the air. My phone rings, and it's these loud, boisterous people at Sparky saying, "Come on down!" It didn't ring once. It didn't ring twice. It rang 3 times. And so we looked at each other and said, what the hell? You know, you can't work out in the garden on a day like this. So I got in the car, and I drove down to Sparky's and drank with them for hours and hours and hours. And they laughed, and they danced, and they sang. Of course, I'm sure it was a little bit different this morning when reality hit, because we took a bath on this pig. I want you to know, a bad bath, and God only knows what the bill was at Sparky's. It probably paled in comparison.
Well, aren't they going to reschedule it?
Reschedule it?
Well, that's what I had heard that they were going to, but I don't have any
Doesn't make any
details on
difference if
that.
we do reschedule it. We still took a bath on it, and I'm telling you, the bar bill at Sparky's probably made what we ate in the promotion look like nothing. Nothing at all, but God, what a great promotion. It's too bad you guys didn't know about it. Let's go to Rick in Tampa. Rick, you're on the air at 970 WFLA.
Hello, Bob.
Hi, Rick.
How you doing?
Not too bad, dude.
I'm doing good. Lou?
Yeah, Rick.
How you doing?
Good.
Good. Listen, I don't want to hurt the doctor's feelings, but I wanted to ask Bob a question.
Yeah,
That's okay.
Have you got your new computer yet?
Oh, dude, why did you have to bring that up?
To change the subject?
Oh, jeez. Well, yeah, no, you see, okay, the computer thing is half joke and half not joke, okay?
Uh-huh.
And so today I called up my number one most trusted authority on computer hardware in Chicago, a guy that I really trust.
Okay.
And so I said, look, I'm not really on my way out the door to buy one, but I'm thinking about one. But since I don't read the trades, since I don't read the, the magazines and all that kind of stuff, I have no idea what's coming up.
Right.
And if I got such and such and such and such and such and such, is there, stuff on the horizon that's going to just blow this away? And the guy becomes almost despondent. I mean, he runs, it's literally his business. He runs a financial bulletin board in Chicago, okay? And he's got 9 computers networked together, and they run 24 hours a day, and it costs hundreds of dollars a year to log on to this thing. And so, I mean, this is literally how he earns his living.
Okay.
And I'm telling you, he became despondent at my question because there's new memory coming out in about a year. This summer there is, another upgrade in the Pentium Pro chip. Just on and on and on and on. And there is no end to it. It is a hopeless, bottomless pit, and I'm so damn despondent over that this afternoon, plus other things, which I'll get into later, that I can hardly sit here. I can hardly sit here because there are two machines I'm looking at. One's about $4,000, and it's just a dream machine. The other machine's about $5,100, and it is beyond a dream. And they will both be obsolete in about 6 months.
Yeah, well, I bought one 6 months ago, and basically it's obsolete. You can just keep building on them, though. That can be fun.
Well, the problem is the direction we're going in is this MMX technology, which has absolutely no interest to me today whatsoever. It's for graphics and multimedia,
right.
and that's not what I use my computer for. But the fear is that the software that we use when it's next updated will take advantage of MMX technology.
Yeah.
And if you don't have it, then it won't run, and you're stuck with the old software. It's hopeless. It's absolutely hopeless.
Yeah, in the long run, you're right. But in between times, why don't you buy yourself a good... Well, Lou's probably got the one you need until you really get what you want. I think I'm cutting out here, Bob.
Okay.
Sorry about it. You have yourself a good evening now.
That's okay. I got to cut out anyway. I mean, I don't want to bring down the show or anything like that, but I was thinking this afternoon about an afternoon, maybe 6-7 months ago, something like that. I was listening to the radio. As a matter of fact, it was the Dr. Lahr show, and I was absolutely enthralled with one pathetic caller after another, and the brilliant wisdom falling from the lips of Dr. Lahr. And I looked over, and there was Rover standing over by the door, going, and I said, "Cool it, Rover. No, just a couple more calls." And so I listened to a couple of more calls, and there was Rover again over by the door, this time, kind of squeezing his hind legs together, going, and I said, "Come on, Rover, just a couple more calls." And he had that look in his eyes, the kind of look they have when they want to go on. And I said, "Oh, geez, Rover." And so I just opened the door and let him outside. Oh, my goodness. And the next thing you know, Mr. Mailman comes by, and Rover does his business, and so he decides to go on the rounds with Mr. Mailman. What? I tell you, I had to drive around for hours looking for Rover. Oh, heart failure, I tell you. Heart failure. Didn't have to be that way, of course. Not if I had an invisible fence. You see, that way I could have stayed indoors listening to Dr. Lahr, let Rover outside. Mr. Mailman came. Rover couldn't have followed him. No way. Not with the invisible fence. The invisible fence, it's the one that you can't see, you can't touch, you can't feel it, you can't smell it, nor do you even have to paint it. The invisible fence keeps Rover in his place, I'll tell you, and allows you to stay safely inside listening to Dr. Lahr. So don't be fooled by those cheap imitations, okay? Insist only on the invisible fence. With over 500,000 dogs on the invisible fence today, it's easy to see why the invisible fence is recommended by their owners to their friends and their family. Only Invisible Fence offers you peace of mind with an unconditional money-back guarantee. Call 800-824-DOGS for a free estimate from your local Invisible Fence of Tampa dealer. That's 800-824-DOGS. Invisible Fence of Tampa.
This ain't no NRA. This ain't no Michigan militia neither. We're talking the right to bear arms. All I want to do is buy a gun before I die. Says the hick next to me out of nowhere. I told him that's a great idea. It says his name is Billy Bob, but I'm sure it's Harry Nichols or John Doe or something like that. And he's bragging to me, and I wonder if he's ever had a real gun in his whole life. We are drinking moonshine at noon on Tuesday, driving our pickups filled with fertilizer. The foolish people of the world are disarming themselves and paying taxes. They trust Uncle Sam and those jackboot thugs. They say that Waco was just an accident. They love the ATF and Janet Reno too. But hell, there's nothing like really bothering me, cause all we wanna do is buy a gun. I've got a feeling we're not the only scum. All we wanna do is buy a gun. I've got a feeling we're not the only ones. All we wanna do is buy a gun. Because shooting harmless people and blowing up things is fun. I like a big bomb blast early in the morning, and Billy likes blowing up schools and buildings so switches and leave the light on as I burn the place right down to the ground. The ATF has no right to bug us, and that damn Clinton should put a fence around the White House, because we'll be driving down Pennsylvania Avenue, and all we want to do is buy a gun. I've got a feeling we're not the only ones. All we want to do is buy a gun. I've got a feeling we're not the only scums. All we want to do is buy a gun. Because shooting harmless people and blowing up things is fun. Yeah! This is dedicated to our Constitution-loving brothers and sisters. Amen.
So anyway, it really is true that you guys missed the probably the best station promotion this station or any other station, any place in the country ever put on Saturday. See, we work for a really neat company, and one of the ideas that this company has is they are not cheap when it comes to bonding and that kind of good stuff. And so here's this absolute disaster. I mean, an absolute disaster. It cost a lot of money, plus the clients have paid to be there. And they're going to be there because, there ain't no rain date or nothing like that. And so anyway, here's this absolute disaster where virtually any other firm, the people would be despondent, the people would be slashing their wrists, the people would be choking each other. And what do? We go to Sparky's and order pizzas and drinks. And it's just like, nonstop. It goes on. I heard that some of them were out till like 3 o'clock the following morning.
Well, they're all better men and women than I am.
Yes. So why weren't you there?
I didn't know about it.
You didn't know about it?
No.
They called virtually everybody at the station.
Jumping off the skyway with some friends, but...
I mean, I thought that by the time they had gotten down to me, they had tried everybody.
I probably wouldn't have gone anyway. It was too crappy out Saturday.
Oh, no, by the time we got to Sparky's and cleared up, and it was beautiful, and it was a pleasant afternoon, and we had a grand old time.
Mm-hmm.
Really had a grand old time. But none of this has anything whatsoever to do with what I came here to talk to you about this afternoon. Absolutely, positively nothing to do with what I came here to talk to you about. What I came here to talk to you about is the future. The future. Because
Futures
that's...
and options?
No. Because the future is where it is at, and I think, I'm pretty damn sure, I'm almost positive that the future showed up today. And you, of course, have no idea what I'm talking about. But that's okay. I'm going to tell you what I'm talking about. It's just that I can't do so with the amount of time I have left in this hour. And on top of that, I've been tap dancing to get through this hour to get into the next hour when I have longer sweeps. But we're going to talk about the future today. I think I saw it painted on the wall. Yep. Pretty damn sure I did. And we're going to talk about it, simply because I have to. There's not really a hell of a lot for you to say, although you're welcome to join in if you so desire. But it's, I don't know, dudes. Got to talk to you. Got to lay it on the line. Have to tell you the way I see it. Have to tell you some of the things that happened, some of the things that are happening, and all that kind of good stuff. It might be worth running tape on. Okay? I tell you when it's worth running tape, and I tell you when it's not. And if I don't say anything, then it's usually not worth running tape. This might be worth tape. Okay? 990 WFLA in Hillsborough. In Pinellas, 461 WFLA. The GT Mobile Net Star line, it's 970 Star.
Well, I told you pretty
Count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 10, 11. After the hour being the 6 o'clock one, it's a Monday, April the 28th, 1997, and I am in a talking mood. I don't know, maybe I'll go the remaining 3 hours. We'll find out. A whole slew of things happened today. There were 3 stories in the newspaper, 2 events, and 1 reality that, to my convoluted way of thinking, all kind of tie together and all kind of join in and fit together. You may not think so. As a matter of fact, I doubt anybody will think so, especially judging from some of the looks that I'm getting around the table, because some of the people around the table know of what I'm talking about. But anyway, let's start with the 3 news stories. I get up this morning, and like everybody else, I open up the newspaper. Well, okay, like about half of you. I open up the newspaper and start going through it, and there's this lovely picture of Ellen DeGeneres and her girlfriend at the White House Correspondents' Ball, or whatever the hell it was, last night. And I'm thinking back to a night or 2 or 3 before that. I'm sitting there flipping around, and there's Ellen being interviewed by Diane Sawyer, and Ellen is saying, Oh, my goodness, I just didn't understand. Oh, my goodness, I had no idea. Oh, my goodness, of course, we've been setting this up for 6 months now. Geez, I didn't know it was going to be such a big thing, and I would have... And there she is, of course. What in the hell is she doing in Washington, D.C.? What in the hell is she doing at the White House Correspondents' dinner, ball, get-together, picnic, whatever the hell it was? Who cares? And I'm sitting there and I'm shaking my head saying, I don't care. I don't care. I don't understand. Why does anybody else care? Why is her picture there? They wasted good ink for this. Trees died so this could be published. Why does anybody care? What difference does it make? And on top of that, everybody's being sucked in. What do you mean she didn't know? Jesus. And so I turn the page. And there's really the big story of the day, which is this volunteer summit in Philadelphia. God, you'd think the world was coming to an end or something, or that it was really important. But there's George Bush and Barbara, and there's Jimmy and Rosalind, and there's Bill and Hillary, and goodness gracious me, there's Colin Powell and all kinds of interesting people, and they're painting over graffiti in a stadium in Philadelphia, feeling ever so good about it and patting each other on the back, trying to set a good example and trying to impress all the rest of us. I'm sitting there thinking, well, Jesus, if you're really trying to do good work, what the hell did you call the press for? And what are you going to be doing next weekend and the weekend after that? I know what you're going to be doing. Absolutely nothing. You're going to be playing golf or on book tours or whatever the hell it is that you do. This is some kind of a sham. This is some kind of a charade. At least one of the television networks had the decency to go a couple of blocks down the street to another volunteer project from another administration a few years earlier, overgrown with weeds, filled with trash and graffiti. But it, too, was heralded with all kinds of coverage. And see, the people that live there, their problem is not graffiti on the walls. Their problem is not trash-strewn lots. That's not their problem. Their problem is they just don't give a crap. They just don't live in the same world that you live in or the same world that I live in. And the last thing in the world they need are people flying in from Washington and Texas and God only knows where else and hundreds and hundreds of news-type people documenting every second of it with film and video. It's the last thing in the world those people need. They need to be brought up to speed. They need to enter into the same world that you and I live in. At least the world that I hope that you live in. And so again, I turn the page, and there's one of these articles. I'm hardly even going to tell you about it. It's the kind that makes your eyeballs just spin around and go, But it's so damned important, and there's utterly no way I can convey it to you. God knows I've tried. It has to do with the Federal Reserve and Mr. Greenspan and their policies and all that kind of stuff. And so it just makes me sit there and shake my head. It, by the way, was buried deep in the paper. The story about Ellen was kind of towards the front. So was the story about the good volunteers. And so you shake your head and, you go, oh, God. And you go on with your life. You do the things that are important to you. At least you try to until that idiot Larson calls you. Hello? 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 Bob? Hello? I can't hear him. I don't think you can hear me. Yes, I can hear you, Mark. I can't hear a word. It's okay. Then I pick up the phone and I call my associate in Chicago, and he depresses the hell out of me by telling me what's happening in the wild world of computers, which, by the way, are basically turning into play toys. See all of this MMX technology and this fireware and all that kind of stuff and the charged up RAM that's coming. It's so you can play games and watch movies on your computer. That's the only purpose of it. So you can log on to the internet and really see the nude pictures in all their glory. They won't be fuzzy at all anymore. And then you can run off, copies of them on your color printer if you have one. Be better than photographs, for God's sake. I don't understand. And then I come in here. Joy, oh joy, oh joy. Can't pinpoint the exact date. Would be even tough to pinpoint the exact year, plus or minus when I can do it. It was sometime when I was around 15, maybe 16 years old. God, I remember the night. I don't know why this night. I have no idea, but I was living in this house in Collingswood, New Jersey, on Park Avenue, right across the street from the park. Park Avenue, the park. And I had this weird little bedroom. It was carved out of an attic. And so the roof was all weird, and you could hardly stand up straight in most of the room. And I just remember, I remember laying in my bed, and if you looked out the window, you saw Don Christ's house. Now, Don Christ owned a music store in Collingswood, New Jersey. And he had a daughter, oh, Jesus. She was a cheerleader. I don't think she ever knew I existed. Why do you remember things like this? Why do things like this stick in your head? And anyway, I'm laying there, and I have the radio on, and I'm listening to WIBG in Philadelphia. The call letters don't even exist in Philadelphia anymore. They're somewhere in the Eastern Shore. And I'm there, and I'm listening to a guy named Frank X. Feller, the disc jockey. He wasn't a real disc jockey at that time. Actually, the real disc jockeys were on strike. He was a strike buster. When I was laying there listening to him, it was about 10:30, maybe 11 o'clock at night. I'll never forget it as long as I live. You ready? Okay. 6:23 is the time.
970 WFLA's Hump Day host Mark Larson will celebrate Ellen's Coming Out Wednesday night at the Cherokee Club in Ybor City on East 9th Avenue. Starting at 6 p.m., you can party with Mark for only a $5 donation benefiting the Human Rights Task Force. There will be an Ellen lookalike contest, a big screen to catch the show, live entertainment, and a free buffet. All at the Cherokee Club in Ybor City, East 9th Avenue from 970 WFLA.
Okay, the reason that sounded so hollow is because he was reading it over my shoulder. And this really has a great deal to do with what I'm talking to you about. He was afraid to get any closer because he might touch me, and I am a radio god, and he didn't want to do that. I don't think we've ever touched. So anyhow, there I am laying in what almost amounts to a garret, candlelit garret, looking out the window at Don Christ's house and thinking to myself, well, I'm slightly ahead of myself. You see, I told you that the regular staff was on strike at the time. They were AFTRA members, the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. And the regular guys were, Jerry... For the life of me, I can't remember the name of the morning guy. I cannot remember his name, but, forgive me. This is, like 35 years ago. But the morning... I can tell you something about the morning guy. He owned a tremendous amount of stock in Continental Airlines. And it was true. He really did. The guy was a frickin' millionaire. And we're talking like, late 50s, early 60s here. That was a lot of money. Jerry Stevens did middays, or what would be called housewife time, 10 to 3. Joe Niagara did afternoon drive. And High Lit did 7 to midnight. God, they were radio gods. Oh, I still remember their names. I can still hear their voices. They were big people. These were stars, man. These were celebrities. These men talked on the radio. And then they went on strike, and this kid, I don't know where the hell he came from. This kid named Frank X. Feller. Jesus, what a stupid name. Although he went on to be a big radio executive, which is good because he wasn't terribly talented on the air. And it suddenly dawned on me that night. That was the first night it ever dawned on me. That I might talk on the radio someday. I was laying there, like I said, looking out the window, thinking, yeah, well, then girls like her would notice me, and I'd be popular and stuff, because if this jerk could talk on the radio, maybe I could talk on the radio. It took 10 years. 10 years before I ever talked on the radio. And then all I did was rip and read newscast and announce another side of Madhavani. But what the hell, I was talking on the radio. And that was the first night unconscious. Yeah, before that, I wanted to be a salesman. Really. I wanted to be a salesman. That would have been quite a step up for a blue-collar kid to be a salesman. You know, drive around in an Oldsmobile. I don't know why. That's what I wanted. I wanted an Oldsmobile 98, okay? And live in a garden apartment. I don't know why I wanted to live in a garden apartment. It seemed cool. And have red velvet furniture. That's what I wanted. Seriously. Truthfully. So what does any of this have to do with all of those things I had mentioned, those 3 stories and the 2 events and the 1 reality, and the reality I haven't even gotten around to yet? I don't know. But it does all fit together somehow. It all fits together somehow. The years came and went, and like I said, it took 10 before I ever sat down behind a microphone. And in the meanwhile, all kinds of wild, bizarre things happened. I hitchhiked back and forth across the country. I lived in New York. I worked in a bathtub factory. I washed dishes. I drove cabs. I tended bar. Never did work as a salesman unless you want to count the little stint that I did selling magazines door to door. That isn't really what I had in mind. I wanted to sell electronics. See, electronics were going to be the future. Oh, God, they were going to be the future. There was this company that I was aware of, not far from my house, Wix Engineering, and they did all kinds of wild and wonderful government work, and I knew some of the salesmen that worked there. That's where my mother worked as a telephone operator, and they really seemed like cool dudes, and that's what I always wanted to do until that night. That night, I said, no, I want to talk on the radio. Radio was a lot different then than it is now. WIBG was a very, very unusual station. It was a top 40 station, one of the first top 40 stations in the country. I mean, prior to that, radio stations were radio stations. You know, I mean, they were for everybody. They weren't for kids, for God's sake. They were, they weren't for adults either. They were for everybody. There was always a guy on in the morning who was, bright and chatty and told you what the temperature was and what the weather forecast was for that day and what time it was and, told you that you only had 9 minutes to get out the door if you had to be at work at 8 o'clock and then played a Frank Sinatra cut or Snooky Lansom or something like that. And during the rest of the day, it wasn't much different. Just fewer weather forecasts, and they didn't tell you that you only had 7 minutes to be someplace, if you had to be someplace by. I told you Friday night, I was remembering a show Friday night at WPEN, another Philadelphia radio station. They did kind of a talk show at night. Never dawned on me to do anything like that. It was kind of hokey. And then one day I got into this silly-ass business. Just fell into it. It was an accident. It was an absolute accident. I remember making a fool of myself. Occasionally calling up disc jockeys saying, God, I want to be in radio. How do I get a job? And they blow me off. That kind of stuff happens all the time. Hell, it even happens here on the air. You can imagine how they handle it off the air. Not very pleasantly, I'll have you know. Not very pleasantly at all. But then the day came. My turn came. September the 1st, 1975. I'll never forget it as long as I live. 7:30 in the morning. 6:35 is the time. So here I was, 25 years old, just getting into the business. Most careers are over in this business by the age of 25, and I was just starting. Wasn't much of a gig. Started off with this half-hour live newscast. No carts, no actualities, no networks. And on top of that, I'm a functionally literate. I can barely read. I've gotten a lot better at it since I started in this business. But, man, I'm telling you. But I'll never forget the first day. First day somebody recognized me. I worked under the name of Ron Scott. Why did I work? I don't know why I worked under the name of Ron Scott. I don't know where the hell it came from. But one of the joys of working in radio is that you used a different name. Didn't everybody? Didn't make any difference if your name was, I can't think of one. A good classic radio name. You still changed it. It was part of the magic, man. You became somebody else when you sat down behind the microphone. You weren't you. You were bigger than life. You were magic. You were the man in the box. I was living with some babe. we'd gone away to St. John for the weekend, took a whole slew of photographs, and I took them in to be printed, developed and printed. I went back to pick them up. I used my real name. And the guy said, "Wait a second, aren't you Ron Scott?" Oh, be still my heart. Be still my heart. Okay, so what if I had this damn miserable sign-on shift and the half-hour rip and read newscast, and then the rest of the shift, the other 5 hours of it, I sat there and played sides of Mantovani. What difference did it make? He recognized me. I was a star. God. Gig paid $125 a week. My second gig paid $100. Then I found myself in between gigs. I don't know where I was going. It was a Saturday morning, somewhere in the middle of winter. It was 1967 now. And I was driving in my car, and whatever was on the radio didn't please me, and so I started punching around, and I came upon this station, WCAU. I was back in the Philadelphia area, and I came upon the station WCAU, which is, it's a legendary set of callers, which also, by the way, no longer exist. It was one of those clear channel stations. Back in the 30s and the 40s, and even into the 1950s, if you bought one of those big fancy schmancy floor model radios, they had push buttons on them, and it didn't make any difference where you lived. The push buttons would say, like, WABC, WLS, WCAU, WLW, the big clear channel stations, because almost any place in the country at night you could pick them up. And CAU was that kind of a station. It was, I always thought of it as kind of, an old fogey station. I mean, man, it wasn't hip and cool like WIBG with all those guys whose names I still remember 35 years later, but they were doing something. There was this guy named Joel Spivak, and he was talking. The 1967 war had just broken out over in Israel, and people were calling him up, and they were talking about it, and they literally had an egg timer. You got 2 minutes. God forbid you should ask Joel a question and he answered, because that counted in your 2 minutes. And the thing would go, ding. Whatever. There we go. It's closer. Yeah, well, it's close enough. And that was it. Sorry, your time is up. Bam. Conshohocken, you're on the air. WCAU. I was fascinated. Just absolutely fascinated. I mean, man, it was really, really cool to be on WIBG and playing the hits and telling about your upcoming sock hop, and these guys were talking. So I was always a current affairs junkie. I mean, even in my wild and crazy days, dropping acid and hitchhiking across the country, I still followed the news. I always cared. I had from the time I was a little kid. And to be talking about the news? Oh, be still my heart. It was another 15 years before I got a chance to do that. But radio was different. God, it was so much different. Those people, they were giants. They were absolute giants. Well, anyway, that very morning that I was listening to Joel Spivak and WCAU, and they were talking about news and stuff like that, there was another medium. This was all AM radio. But there was another one. It was called FM. And FM radio had always existed. It's damn near as old as AM radio, but nobody had FM receivers. Oh, if you had one of those big fancy schmancy three-way combo television sets, it was a television, a record player, and a radio. They had the FM channel, but there wasn't really much on it. Almost all the FM stations, and they, for all practical purposes, did not exist in smaller markets, but in the larger markets, almost all of the FM stations were owned by, like, newspapers, and they didn't know what to do with them, so they just played this beautiful music or symphonic music, frequently without even an announcer. They would just, play it wall to wall, and there frequently weren't even any commercials, because who the hell was going to buy a FM that nobody could listen to? I got kind of sidetracked, because along about the same time, in Philadelphia and in Cleveland and in New York and in Chicago, almost spontaneously, a bunch of kids went to the owners of these radio stations and said, well, look, let us play with them for a while. In Philadelphia, the big station, or what was to become the big station, was WMMR. It at the time was owned by the Philadelphia Bulletin, a newspaper, a defunct newspaper. It's been out of business for probably 20, 25 years now. And they gave these kids the overnights from midnight until 6 a.m. And they started playing these weird records that people had hardly ever heard of. You know, guys like John Mayall and Janis Joplin and Led Zeppelin and people that you know, the records they sold a little bit, but they were way too long for radio, you know, real radio like AM. And it kind of caught on. A little bit. People started listening, and they sold spots to head shops and bars and concerts. And so they let them come on at 9 o'clock at night, and then they let them come on at 6 o'clock, and pretty soon it was the whole... And I got caught up in part of that. I got caught up in that. God, it was fun, man. Oh, Jesus. I mean, there was no such thing as music directors and program directors and that kind of stuff. I mean, you were hired to go in and play music. And you'd go in a half hour, an hour before your show, and you'd pull, you know, if you were in a bad mood, you know, maybe your old lady had, you know, left you or something like that, you'd play 4 hours of love songs. You'd sit there and cry your full head off, or if you were stoned, you'd sit there and play some really funky stuff and get up and dance around the studio, and the phones would ring, and people would be talking to you on the phone, and maybe you'd be invited out for a party, or maybe some chick would call, and you'd strike up a conversation with her. And, oh, man, it was fun. God almighty, it was fun. By then I was working in Norfolk, Virginia, and probably like the poor guy that did mornings at WIBG, nobody remembers my name, but it was a big station, and I had a good time. I don't know where you grew up. I don't care where you grew up. It doesn't make any difference. If you're like, you know, in that 35-plus category, surely you remember the names of the magic men who talked through that box. They were part of your life. If you grew up in Chicago, there are names like, you know, Lou Jack and Landecker. If you grew up in the New York area, it was Cousin Brucey, or in Philadelphia, there are even more names than the ones I've mentioned. Same thing in L.A., same thing in Frisco, same thing in Cleveland, same thing in Atlanta, same thing in Miami, same thing probably in Tampa. Same thing in Davenport, Iowa. It didn't make any difference how big, how small the town. These were important people. These were people who were part of your life. Almost none of them exist anymore. Almost none of them. Handfuls still hanging on here, there, or the other place. Actually, Don Imus would be one of those people. Of course, he doesn't play records anymore. Doesn't do sock ops anymore. Kind of talks a little bit. Just basically goofs on the audience. He's on 100, 150 stations now. He used to be on just one. He was probably bigger then than he is now. Business is changing. Life is changing. So what does any of this have to do with Ellen and the volunteers and the Federal Reserve and the computers and, oh God, so much. So very, very much. So incredibly much. 3 or 4 weeks ago, walked in here on a Tuesday morning for one of our staff meetings, and as I've told you about the staff meetings before, they're almost social events, okay? To get people together who don't otherwise work together. And if there's some kind of news going on, then that news is passed along, and more often than not, there really isn't anything happening. And so we go through this little charade, and, you know, Sue, because she does the meetings now, will say, well, you know, the book runs until such and such, and, you know, we could really use help with some time spent listening. Renee, you know, anything from promotions? Read your calendar. Engineering, anything? No, nothing here. Okay. And that's usually pretty much the meeting, and every now and then there is something. Started about a year ago, and it started out with, today we bought 7 stations in such and such and such and such and such and such, and today we bought 31 stations and ta-da, 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 and blah, 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 and today we bought 14 stations and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Oh, yesterday we sold to comply with the Department of Justice ruling, ta-da, 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 ta-da. But then a couple of weeks ago, it was, we bought EFM. Oh, who the hell's EFM? Are we on WEF? No, EFM. EFM is the real corporate name for the Excellence in Broadcasting Network, whatever the hell he calls himself. Rush Limbaugh. And then a week or so after that, we bought Prime Stars? Premiere, yeah, which is some syndicated shows and rock comedy and a couple of other comedy services and some other stuff. And then about 2 weeks ago we walked in, we were told about Dick Morris. That one really bummed me out. It bummed me out for a lot of reasons. It had nothing whatsoever to do with Dick Morris. I don't know who the hell Dick Morris is. I couldn't care less about Dick Morris and his tryst with hookers or letting the hookers listen to the president. I couldn't care less about that kind of crap. That has no effect on my life. It's great gossip, I suppose, but... is the time, but as per usual, I'm getting way ahead of myself. So let me back up a little bit here. Let me back up to those days of dancing around the studio and playing love songs when you're in love and having a grand old time. Those days came to an end. They came to an end because it was successful, because it worked. Like I told you, most of the FM stations back then were owned by newspapers or television stations or banks. And they didn't really want anything to do with these long-haired weird people smoking dope in their radio stations and dancing and having a good old time. And then all of a sudden the properties started to become worth something, and so they basically started to sell them. And they sold them to people who were into broadcasting or into speculation or whatever it might be, who paid a lot of money for them and paid way too much money to let a bunch of kids have fun running a radio station. So they went out and hired research people and music directors and program directors. And slowly but surely it started to change. Oh, you still had maybe 10,000 albums in the studio, but now you can only play 2 or 3 cuts off of each one. But you could still kind of put together and still kind of have some fun, and it changed some more, and then pretty soon you had a computer playlist printed out, and it told you which order to play things in, and it just wasn't as much fun anymore. It wasn't as much fun at all. Oh, you could still dance around the studio, and the phone still rang, and people still recognized your name, and it was almost as good, but it just wasn't quite as good. I went back to the beautiful music stations. You know, the deep voice, all that kind of stuff, cup your ear. It's so relaxing. They paid me more money than they paid me at the rock and roll stations. And then one day my life fell apart, and I was going through a divorce and drinking myself silly, and the phone rang, and a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend had recommended me for a gig doing a talk show on the weekends in Miami, and I said, well, yes, sure, why not? I've told you the story before, I won't labor the point. First guest was a dentist. Hello, doctor. Let me do 1 hour of open phones, and I became hooked. I was finally in talk radio. Oh, my God. One night, Sunday night, I found myself driving to Tampa, Florida with everything I owned in the back seat of a car that I was 5 months behind in the payments on. Just a little bit south of Sarasota, the tire came apart. I made the rest of the trip on the steel belt because my trunk was packed and I didn't feel like unpacking it to get to the spare tire, and so what the hell? Figured I'd drive on it as long as I could. I did make it. I finally made it. And the next day I did my first show in Tampa, Florida. I was at WPLP, and some of you know about that, and I ended up over here, and some of you know about that, and then I went to Chicago, and some of you know about that, and then I came back and went to WSUN, and some of you know about that. When I came back here, I'd been out of the business for about 1.5 years in between the last show in Chicago and the first show here. I came back here and I sat down and I realized that something had changed. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I knew that something had changed. It just wasn't the way it used to be. Okay, it was a different day part for me. I was now working mornings, but I knew that something wasn't quite right. And there was a time when you came in and you sat down and you said, hey, it's the beginning of the show. We're going to talk about blah-da-da-da, whatever the hell it was. And bam, there were people who wanted to talk about blah-da-da-da-da, and there were other people that said, no, I want to talk about da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then there were the cranks, and then there was the, oh, God, it was fun, and it wasn't quite the same when I came back here 4 years ago. Couldn't put my finger on it. See, this is what I do for a living, although it's actually, I do 2 things for a living. The other thing is that dream, you know, that future stuff, and we won't get into that just yet anyway. And so I think about this all the time, and I'm very, very concerned about it. When the thing blew up at FLA, or excuse me, at SUN, and I was on the beach for another 4 months, We went through this mating dance, FLA and myself went through this mating dance about my coming back, and it, the bridges had been burned, and it was really touchy. They thought I hated them, I thought they hated me, and it took a long time, testing the waters, because of course nobody wanted to embarrass themselves. And one day Trikas came over to my house, and we sat there and we talked for, 2 or 3 hours at my kitchen table, and we talked about all kinds of things. Talked about how the business had changed, talked about the effect that the internet had on the business. We talked about the fact that almost nobody did this full-time anymore, that I was kind of a dinosaur. I was one of the very few people that actually did this as a full-time job, because at this radio station there was Larson, who of course has his voiceover business, and then there's Brian, who has his voiceover business, and they basically do this as part-time work. They don't take it nearly as seriously as I do, and they don't sit there and rip it apart and try to figure it out and put it back together and then reinvent it, and they just come in, they do it, and they go home. And we talked about that, too. I guess it was about 6 months ago we came to one of those staff meetings. Beginning to hate those damn staff meetings, I'll tell you, man. We were told about Dr. Laura. Everybody said, no, no, no. Not because she's bad or anything like that. It's just that, that's not news talk, man. That's almost like having the dentist on. Hello, doctor? I have a sore tooth. What do you think it could be? Hello, doctor? My life is messed up. What do you think it could be? I mean, what the hell's the difference? What the hell's the difference? That's not talk radio, for God's sake. That's kind of crap you put on, I don't know, in the middle of the night or something, or on weekends. No, this is terrible. This is a mistake. No, I'm telling you, this stuff works. No, it can't. Yeah, in Chicago it works, in this town it works, in that town it works. God, in some towns she's kicking butt, making Limbaugh look like a loser. Now this is the future. We got to have this, because if we don't put it on, somebody else is going to... yeah, you're wrong. You people don't know what you're talking about. Well, on top of that, it's what Cincinnati wants to do, and so, we're going to rearrange the radio station. Jesus, this is going to bomb. And then last December, we're looking at the trends, and, God almighty, nobody's listening to it. This is terrible. I mean, she has no numbers. Well, this will be off the air in no time at all. We got the hour by hours today. It's a top-rated show on the station. Beat Limbaugh.
This program is being presented completely uncensored and unedited, except for parts we've taken out, on 970 WFLA.
The 7 o'clock one, the third one of 4 for a Monday, April the 28th, 1997. I came to this town in, I believe it was 1985, September of 1985, for a whopping $18,000 a year at WPLP. They were to give me a $2,000 raise every 6 months. I didn't have a contract. It was a gentleman's agreement. They didn't keep it. I finally left that station making $22,000 a year to come to work for WFLA in 1987. For $44,000 a year. The day I started, they cut me to $35,000. First year here was absolute agony and hell. I mean, some of the most horrible things went on. The station was owned by a company named Sconix, and they were real bastards. They jerked Teddy Webb around, they jerked me around, they jerked anybody around they could get their hands on. And working here was a nightmare. We had no money. We couldn't afford tape. We couldn't afford, paper clips, on and on and on and on. But the station was filled with people who loved radio, just absolutely loved radio, and they put up with all these indignities and all that crap and all the bull nonsense. And finally, the radio station was sold after I had been here for a year to a company named J-Corps. And there were some interesting people at this radio station. A lot of them are still here. But we kicked ass. God almighty, we kicked ass. We had a great time. The station was primarily Dick Norman and myself. Dick Norman died. I left 6 months later. Station kind of fell apart. And it took several years to put it back together again. But again, one of the things that is so incredibly unique about this radio station is that almost everybody in it, from the receptionist right on up to the general manager, loves radio. And the station has been blessed with a lot of young people who brought new blood to it and kept the older people on their toes. Made it fun to work here, made it fun to listen to it. It still pretty much is. It's not as much fun as it used to be, but the reason it isn't as much fun as it used to be is there isn't as much of it as there used to be. Horrible, terrible, terrible things have happened in this country. Things called deregulation has destroyed the communications business, it has destroyed the airline business, and it's destroying broadcasting. Seemed like a great idea at the time. Seemed like a very good idea at the time. See, one of the things that's wrong with radio is that there are very few broadcasters left. Most of the companies that own radio stations are headed by speculators. It doesn't make any difference to them if they own, soda pop bottling companies or they own airlines or radio stations. It doesn't make any difference. These were very smart, very shrewd men. They sat down with a piece of paper and a pencil and a calculator, and they dealt with radio stations the same way they dealt with airlines. They went through and said, well, on paper, this sucker is worth X number of dollars, and if we buy it, if we borrow the money to buy it, we can cut here, we can cut there, we can cut there, we can cut the other place, we can cut back on that, we can eliminate that, and we can save enough money that this pig will actually pay for itself. So we have no money in it. It's all borrowed money, and we cut here, and we cut there, and we cut the other place, and pretty soon we pay it off, and we walk away with everything. Everything. It's probably happened in your industry. Maybe not as severely. Maybe it's happened even more severely in your industry than it's happened in mine. And then there was that messy little problem of, well, you can only own 14 radio stations, 7 AM, 7 FMs. And so the big boys, they went to their good friends in Congress, and they said, look, this is so unreasonable. Let us own maybe 21. And they said, well, yeah, I guess we could do that. And then they went back and they said, look, this is so unreasonable. What's this artificial number? Look, instead of this artificial number of X number of stations, let's do it this way. Because, we understand about monopolies and all that kind of stuff, and, we don't want to concern you. Let's not worry about the number of radio stations we own. Let's worry about the share of the audience that we would have in a particular market. I mean, for example, in New York City, if that meant, we owned 17 stations but only had a 22 share, that would be okay. You got any problem with that? And so the gutless bastards in Congress said, well, I guess not. It's how come we own about 130 radio stations. I have to say about because we don't know. Believe it or not, we do not know. And the reason we don't know is it's not because, Russell Link, hasn't totaled them up yet or something like that. It's that these deals are so incredibly complex. It's, we'll sell you 2 here, but if we sell you 2 here, you got to sell 3 there. And if you sell 3 there, you can buy 9 here. And so we're constantly buying and selling radio stations. And it frankly all depends on, you looking at your watch. Oh, it's 10 after 7. We must own 131, but tomorrow. And we're not the only company in this particular situation. We're not the only company at all, but I said the business had changed, and I knew it had changed when I came back, and I couldn't quite figure out why. What was it? And people would call me and say, oh, Bob, you've changed. Boy, that would piss me off. What do you mean I've changed? No, I haven't changed. I'm better than ever. God, I'm much better than I used to be. And then it dawned on me. The audience had changed. The callers had changed. It wasn't me, it was them. And they'd get pissed off when I told them that. Just like I would get pissed off when they told me I had changed. Why did they change? I couldn't figure it out. What the hell was it? They start putting fluoride in the water. Was it some mind-numbing gas dropped by the Russians? No, the Russians aren't a problem anymore. It couldn't be that. Fluoride doesn't really that. I don't know. Why has it changed? Why has it changed? And I started thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. And I'm sitting over at WSUN, and of course this is this incredible mishmash of a radio station. I mean, we got guys on in the morning taking shots out of hookers' belly buttons, and that's followed by some former waitress, and that's followed by me, and I'm followed by a psychic, and that's followed by the filthy vile sex expert, and then it starts all over again. And I'd listen to FLA, FLA, had become right-wing radio. Well, no, not really, but... And this was the strangest damn thing to me because I knew all the people that were over here, and they weren't, right-wing lunatics, but, God, you got Larson on in the morning, and then there's that Limbaugh character, and God almighty, and then... That Limbaugh character. See, Rush is not a talk show host. Well, not in the traditional sense. See, a talk show host comes in, and he primes the pump and takes calls. A talk show host generates calls. It's one of the things that made me kind of different, kind of unique in this market, is that I could sit here and talk to you for 3 hours. Or 4 if I had to. Not every day, but I could do it. Every day I could do it for at least 1 or 2 hours. Then came along this guy that didn't work for calls. See, when I was here before... Well, you know about the ratings, don't you? Well, actually, you don't know about the ratings. You know about them. You know about them as much as we can tell you, and we can't tell you everything. Not because it's against the law or something like that. It's because the damned ratings company that we have to buy these things from gives us very strict limitations as to what we can tell you about them. Well, one of the things about the ratings is that they're actually a throwback to the old days. They're broken up into categories. 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. That used to be morning drive. Every morning show used to be on from 6 to 10. From 10 to 3 was housewife time. And so it's 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Then you've got 3 p.m. to 7 p.m., which is afternoon drive, 7 p.m. to midnight, which is evenings, and then overnight, which they really don't even bother with, which goes from midnight to 6 a.m. Problem is, very few shows are actually on those hours anymore, so the good folks at Arbitron put out something else called the Hour by Hours. The ratings came in last week. If you'll recall, I said, but I can't tell you until, Monday or Tuesday because we don't get the Hour by Hours until then. You have to buy them separately. You have to buy this piece of software and then break them down. They used to put them in the book, but they don't anymore because they can get more money from you because they know that you desperately need the Hour by Hours since almost nobody's on those hours. Now the Hour by Hours came in today. Last Thursday and Friday, I'd walk down the hall and people would come up and say, "Whoa!" Pat me on the back. "Great book, Lassiter." And I said, "Well, let's make sure here." You see, because I straddle 2 different day parts. I share half of the first day part with Dr. Lara. I share half of the second day part with Bruce. Both syndicated shows. Did I mention syndication? Yeah, let me go back to that Rush thing. See, Rush doesn't work for calls. Rush sits there and basically talks. It's not like he does a monologue the way I do. He doesn't. He basically takes various different little clippings from the newspaper and comments on them. And sometimes he comments for 30 seconds and sometimes he comments for a half an hour. Now, when I was here before, there was this incredible bubble in the middle of the day. I had humongous numbers, but I didn't transfer those numbers to other day parts. So if you looked at the Hour by Hours, if you drew it out into a graph, for 21 hours out of the day, the radio station had a very significant and a very steady audience. And then the hours that I was on, the audience shot up. People came rushing into the radio station to listen to me, and then went rushing out as soon as my show was over. Which was all fine and well for selling that particular day part, and nobody minded, thank you. We were pretty damn happy to have it, and we certainly wouldn't mind having it again. But then I left, and the same thing happened with Rush. Phenomenal numbers. Gigantic numbers. Bigger than mine when I was here. Like 9 and 10 shares. I did 8 shares. People came rushing in, listened, show was over, went running away. They weren't talk radio listeners. They were Rush Limbaugh listeners. They were people that wanted to be reinforced in whatever their political beliefs were. And he did that. He did it very well, and he continues to do it terribly well. He doesn't have anywhere near that share anymore, not even close to it. Hasn't for 4 or 5 years. Numbers are half of what they used to be. They're still very significant, thank you, but they're half of what they used to be. And those of us in the industry, those of us who really enjoy local talk radio, have been walking around now for 5 years saying, yes, yes, he's gone, it's over, it's over. And there he sits with his damn 5 or 6 share. Book in, book out. Book in, book out. was the first person to be syndicated nationally during the daytime. There have been other syndicated talk radio shows, Larry King, just to name one, Jim Bohannon. They're all on at night. Night is where it used to be in this format. And that changed, more than a half a dozen years ago, almost a dozen years ago, that started to change, and then days became the big thing. And so that's why the syndication came on at night. Didn't cost you anything. Hell, sometimes you actually got paid to run those shows. Nobody realized what kind of an effect they would have. Because first of all, you see, they weren't priming the pump for calls. They were on 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600 stations. You don't even have to give out the numbers. You know, somebody in Pocatello would call, somebody in Providence would call, somebody in Miami would call, somebody in Tampa would call. You didn't have to incite, you didn't have to entice, you didn't have to provoke. Or if you were like Limbaugh, you didn't even have to take calls. Just sat there and said what the people wanted to hear, a certain segment of the population. Problem is that you had to stop the show, the show on the station, the local show. You had to stop it dead and go for 3 hours to a syndicated show. And then when you came back, you had to start it up all over again. It was kind of like turning the radio station on from scratch. There hadn't been a live call on the air for 3 hours, and on top of that, the people who were really into calling were frustrated. They couldn't call Rush. They went away. And the people that weren't callers got sick and tired of hearing you ask for calls. So they went away. It's one of those catch-22 things, you know? .25 is the time.
Rush Limbaugh, weekdays, noon to 3 on 970 WFLA.
Brief, to the point. Oh, let me make this story sexy. Let me tell you some things that you don't know, unless you listen to my first show when I came back at WSU. And I did this at that time, haven't done it since. So unless you were there at 6 o'clock in the morning, I think it was January 23rd, if memory serves me, 4 years ago. You don't know this. When I left here, I was earning $77,400 a year. That was my base salary with bonuses and endorsements and things of that nature. I earned $105,000 my last year here. When they called me from Chicago, people at capital cities were very well aware of me. They knew precisely who I was. They knew that I was a franchise player, and they wanted to do talk in Chicago. WLS, it's a legendary station, a gigantic station. And it still was doing fairly well, nowhere as near what it once was, but it was still doing fairly well with some legendary people on the air, people whose names mean something to half the people in this country. Larry Lujak, he was still there. John Reckerts Landecker, he was still there. I replaced him. Well, I got in touch with capital cities, and they said, boy, you're the one we want. You are the one we want. They offered me $1,050,000. That was my contract, 5 years. First year was $165,000 base salary, exclusive of any endorsements or perks or bonuses. 2 years before, I was making 18, for God's sake. 3 years before 18. What I didn't realize is the man I replaced was earning $750,000. So they hired me first. I've told you the story. I did a cartwheel in the bed. Cartwheel in the bed when they called me and said, okay, it's a deal. Then they hired a morning team. Paid them about $225,000 a year. $225,000 a year. God almighty. They didn't know it, and I didn't know it. The man they replaced was earning $1 million a year and still had 7 years left on his contract. They just finished paying him off. Then they hired a guy to do middays. And they paid him about $135,000 a year. I have no idea what the guy that he replaced was earning. And then they said, whoa, we're doing this to save money. So instead of hiring somebody in between middays and afternoon drive, there was this fat guy come out of Sacramento, California. Had this syndicated show. It was the first daytime syndicated show. Didn't really have any success. We didn't really plan on carrying it very long. We were just going to put it on until we got up and running. Same as Rush Limbaugh. And it didn't really have a tremendous amount of success. It didn't set the world on fire. But I found myself for the first time following 3 hours of taped programming. We didn't even run it live. Every day I had to come in and fire up that sucker again. Which wasn't always easy, wasn't impossible. Some days were easier than others. I never really thought about it too much. 2.5 years went by. We never replaced him. We never put on a live show. Didn't cost us a penny to run that sucker. Nothing. Bean counters figured that one out. So they'd saved a tremendous amount of money when they blew out Landecker. They saved a tremendous amount of money when they blew out Lou Jack. And they saved a tremendous amount of money by having 3 hours in the middle of the day that cost them absolutely positively nothing. Nothing. And this is a station of heavy hitters. This is a station of, the guy on in the mornings was named Stacy Taylor. He pulled 9s and 10s in San Diego. The guy on an afternoon drive was Bob Lassiter. He pulled 8s in Tampa. People on in the morning pulled 3s and 4s and 5s in Chicago. All of us together cost less than one of the people they blew out. Plus, they got a bonus show for nothing. Plus, the ABC radio network was still on, doing talk at night, so we carried that for nothing. We only had 3 live shows. Then they blew all of us out and replaced us with people who earned scale. Less money than I earned in Tampa. By the time I came back here, still couldn't quite put my finger on it. What in the hell is it? What's the difference? 7:34 is the time. You see, you have to put all of this in proper perspective. A dozen years ago when I came to this town, talk radio was really quite amusing. Incredibly amusing. It was basically old men talking to older men. And exciting shows. And these, honest to God, some of you were around. You know I'm not lying. You know I'm not exaggerating. But some exciting shows that I heard in this market were things like, if you know anybody famous, give me a call. And that was it. And the guy just repeated it over and over and over again and got one call in an hour from somebody who knew one of the Harmonicats. It's a group of harmonica players that enjoyed a minor career in the late 1940s, early 1950s. Another show that I heard in this market was, what's your favorite vaudeville theater? Another show I heard in this market, the guy's name was Art Deneen. He unfortunately is the man that hired me. Over and over, and he would do the show. He would do the show repeatedly about once a month. I own a Corvette. Do you own a Corvette? Give me a call if you do. What do you think about Corvettes? Would you like to own a Corvette? Did I mention that I owned one? And he'd get 2 calls an hour. And I came in and sat down and said, Ronald Reagan's a moron and an idiot. You'll piss on his grave one of these days. And the old people went berserk. Absolutely berserk. And I would talk and talk and talk and talk. I'd spend an hour and a half every day saying, in essence, the same damn thing, driving these people insane. And this is what made my act here. And then young people started to listen to it because they liked hearing the old people beat up on. And then some people thought they'd get in on the fun, and so they created characters. And they would call me, and, the character and I would go at it round and round and round and round and round. And they heard about this in New York and said, whoa, ho, ho-de, ho, ho, we want this in New York. And the people that I worked for here at the time wouldn't let me go to New York. But then the people in New York also had another radio station in Chicago, and by the time they were ready to do that, I had a different contractual situation, and so I went to Chicago, and this is what I was going to do in Chicago. They heard it the first day and said, no! No, no! God, we love that on FLA and Tampa, but no, not here! And there was this fat man on tape. You see, a good talk radio show back then made your head hurt. Made your head hurt. See, a good talk radio show back then, and it didn't make any difference if the person was of the conservative bent or the liberal bent or some other bent, or just wasn't even bent at all. He basically came in and confronted you and defied you to respond to whatever he had to say. Then this fat guy from New York comes on, and he tells you it's somebody else's fault. Everything that's wrong is somebody else's fault. He never quite tells you who. He never quite tells you how or why. Doesn't make any difference. But he sits there every day and tells you, whatever's wrong, it's somebody else's fault. I sat there every day and said, whatever's wrong, it's your fault. Well, what I didn't realize was happening is that all of those people that used to call up and confront you, Reagan's a moron, didn't have to anymore. They didn't have to. They could sit there and listen to the syndicated man who told them the exact opposite. And if he did take a call, which is relatively rare, it was somebody who agreed with him. Yeah, Rush, you're right. Them damn liberals. Liberals, Rush. So they didn't have to confront you anymore. And that's what I finally figured out when I came back. That's why it was different. Everybody that called me, they agreed with me. And if they didn't agree with me, they had nothing to argue about. They would just scream. Ah! Until we'd cut it off. And then, of course, there was that deregulation stuff. See, at first when they sat down and thought about deregulation, they said, well, if we owned 3 stations in the market, we'd only need 1 receptionist. And we'd only need so many salespeople, and we'd only have to have 1 cleaning service instead of 3, and yeah. And then they figured out, holy mother of God, we can get rid of 2 general managers, too. And we can get rid of 2 bookkeepers. And then I'm not really quite sure how it happened, but infamous people started to get radio shows. Watergate burglars, and Iran-Contra liars, and doctors. There was a station out in Los Angeles, KFI. My God, what a disaster it was. It was an absolute hopeless disaster. Year in and year out, it was destroyed by its competition. It was owned by Cox Broadcasting, the same people that I worked for at WSUN, KFI. Legendary call letters, great dial position, just a bomb of a station. No matter what they tried, it didn't work. They put on that fat man. It worked. 6 here in Los Angeles, that's a damn big number. That is a damned big number, especially when it doesn't cost you anything. So what now does all this have to do with the 3 stories, the 2 events, and the 1 reality that I mentioned earlier? And by the way, it's actually 2 realities. I haven't told you about the second one. A lot, I'll get to it, trust me. Be patient. So anyhow, we now do 5.5 hours in between live calls on this radio station. Between the end of Larson's show and the beginning of mine. 5.5 hours. Then I do 4 hours, which spans 2 day parts. And then it's like another 12.5 hours till we take another live call. Wow. Wow. And sometimes it's damn difficult to get it fired up again. Damn difficult. You've heard Larson sit there and read out of the newspaper to you. Hell, last Friday night I sat here and played bits for 2 hours because I was just really, really disgusted with what I was getting on the phones. It wasn't worth it. It was better to play bits. And then there are other days you can't fight them away with a bat, but you just never know anymore. You just never know. When I broke into this business, I did a 5-hour talk show. 5-hour talk show. Non-stop, full board. Every single day. Without fail. I mean, if you dropped... God, we had 10 incoming lines. If we dropped down to 5 or 6, we complained. What in the hell's the matter with you people? But But you see, one of the things that we've done is to condition the audience not to participate. I mentioned 2 realities. One of the realities was the book today, The Hour by Hours. In Dr. Laura's last hour, she did a 6.1. I've done bigger than that. I've done much bigger than that. My first hour coming out of Dr. Laura, I take that back, she did a 6.6. My first hour coming out of Dr. Laura, 4.1. I've never in my entire life seen a 2.5 point drop from 1 hour to the next in prime time. I've never seen that before. The astonishing thing is, Rush's last hour and Dr. Laura's first hour, virtually the same. 2 different audiences. All the Rush people go rushing out. All the Dr. Laura people come rushing in, and guess what they do at 5 o'clock? Because they're not talk radio listeners. These people don't wish to be challenged. They don't wish to talk about the issues of the day seriously or even lightheartedly. Oh, are there exceptions? Are there people that listen to both shows? Well, of course there are. But the sad fact of the matter is, if we put on 4 hours of static and then started my show, there would be people that listen to the 4 hours of static and my show. There are people that can't drive away, no matter what you do. I've told the story before, I'll tell it again. First or second week in Chicago, this guy calls up, says, I've been listening to WLS for, 27, 28, 29 years, 20-some years, almost 30. And if you people are going to continue to talk, I'm going to stop listening. We'd gone through like a half a dozen formats in that time. There was nothing we could do to drive this man away. And he was still there listening. There are some people it doesn't make any difference. They've locked in the knob and ripped it off. But the reality is we are now running programming that is directed to people who are not talk show people. Remember the meeting I talked about when we were first told about Dr. Laura and everybody was screaming, no, no, no. It's not because she does a bad show. She doesn't do a talk show. It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. Would we like to think we do? But that doesn't make any difference. Because the reality is, this is the future. The future is here. The future is now. And so then a couple of weeks ago when we were told about Dick Morris, the basic reaction was, no, 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 this isn't a talk show host. This is some infamous man who happens to know Bill Clinton. How the hell does that qualify him? Well, we were told how it qualifies him. Upper level management has decided the time is right for what amounts to an anti-Rush show. It's not like he's going to come on every day and say, well, Rush Limbaugh said ta-da, 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 and I say blah, 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 blah. No, it's not going to be that way at all. It's going to be cheerleading and hand-holding and reassurance for people with a differing point of view. I mean, you heard 4 days of it, or maybe you didn't, but if you did, what did you hear for 4 days? How great we are. And here's a statistic, and here's another one. I sat here for an hour and a half with a man one night last week, challenged everything he said. I'd never had anything like that happen to me before in my life. By the time the hour and a half was over, the guy was sitting there sweating. Literally. He had never been grilled like that in his entire life. It's not that it was an antagonistic conversation. It wasn't. It's just that everything he said I challenged. And most of the stuff that I challenged, he couldn't back up, and so he just danced around it and went on his way. It's going to be, assuming it gets on the air, and it probably will, the very same thing that I accuse the other side of having. It's going to be group support radio for the left. Such is life. Strange damn thing happened, too, that night. He was late getting in here. He was only sitting down as the music was playing. But about 5 minutes before that, some incredibly fat man with a bag of sodas walked in and sat down. I'd never seen this man before in my entire life. Wasn't even dressed very well. Strange things sometimes happen in radio stations, and I didn't know. Maybe it was a friend of Flounder's, for God's sake. And Flounder said, oh, yeah, sure, you can sit on Bob's show. I wasn't too happy about it, having a stranger in my studio. I like to control my environment. I don't like to be looked at. First break came. Dick Morris knows this man, because he started talking to him. And the guy's over there, and I'm telling you, man, he's enjoying himself like you've never seen anybody enjoy himself. He's squealing with delight. He's kicking his feet. His hands are flailing in the air as I'm putting it to Morris. And we'd go into a break, and Morris again would loosen his tie. Look, how am I doing, Tom? Oh, you're doing great. You're doing great. Show's over. Tom starts talking to me. Becomes apparent that he's a Lassiter fan. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff about me. All kinds of things about me and stuff that I've done. And you know, I'm a little uncomfortable because I still have no idea who this man is, and I'm trying to get the hell out of the studio. And it's really awkward. I'm standing at the door, I got all my stuff, and he keeps talking, and he's talking about me, and squealing with delight, and the whole thing. I get the hell out of the room, I go down the hall, I go into Tricas's office. I find out he's one of the most powerful men in radio. He's a syndicator. The man who's syndicating Dick Morris's show. Absolutely loved what I did. Enjoyed himself thoroughly. Has no interest in me, except as a listener. I'm not infamous. I've never been caught with a hooker. I don't sit around and talk about my sex addiction. That's the hook. That's the hook with Dick Morris. That's the future. He's another Gordon Liddy. He's another Ollie North. His last night on the air, he actually did the show from New York. You weren't supposed to know that. But they did it from New York to see how it would sound if we did it here. And so we have this computer program, and I'm sitting here literally looking at the screen that he's looking at in New York. And he's on the air for about 15 minutes, and he's got 4 calls, and he hasn't even given out the phone numbers yet. And I actually got mildly pissed until I read them, what they wanted to talk about. All glad-handing. You're a breath of fresh air, Dick. Good luck, Dick. Didn't want to talk to him about anything. Absolutely nothing at all. They just wanted to listen to him.
A reputation for agitation.
The most temperamental man in the industry.
The Mad Dog on 970 WFLA.
Six and a half minutes after the hour. So what the hell does all this have to do with those 3 stories and the 2 events and the 2 realities? Well, a great deal, actually. Let's go back and look at the 3 stories. First one that I saw this morning was the Ellen story, which it boggles my mind, man. It just boggles my mind. Why this story is on the news, why this story is in the newspaper, why it's on television, why it's on radio. Who cares? It's one of the... I mean, it's not even clever. It's not even close to clever in terms of manipulation, in terms of creating an event, in terms of creating some type of an event. It's not. It's none of those things. Okay. But it's what we've become. See, there is a certain percentage of the audience, a certain percentage of the population that frankly don't have lives and that live their lives vicariously through other people. Then there is a certain percentage of the population that just likes to bitch and moan about everything, especially if it doesn't really make any difference. It's, rumor mongering. It's getting down in the gutter. It's, mildly naughty. You don't think they knew that when they, packed old Ellen and her girlfriend on an airplane and sent them over to Washington, D.C. to attend the Correspondents' Dinner, the White House Correspondents' Dinner, knowing full well that the 2 ladies would have their photographs taken and would appear in the front page of, or at least one of the pages of every newspaper in the entire country. You don't think they knew that? You don't think they know what kind of suckers you are? Yeah, they do. And for the 30 or 40% of you who, ain't such big suckers, screw you, dude. We're going for the other 60 or 70%. That was story number 1. Story number 2, the Volunteer Summit. Do you think the lives of anybody in Philadelphia is better tonight than it was last night? No. But, oh my God, there was the president with his gimpy leg, and he's painting, and there's Hillary with her fat legs, and she's painting, and there's Jimmy, and there's Rosalind, and there's Babs, and George, and Colin. And it actually looks like they're doing something. It actually looks like, they're trying to make this a better place to live. Where the hell were they the week before? Where are they going to be next week? Not in Philadelphia painting stadiums, and nor are they going to be in Toledo or Pasadena. It's all over with. It's all done with, man. It was an event. Just an event. It was a media event. all over the country today. People talked about it. People complained about it. People said, oh, no, don't complain. This is good. You know, this is what we have to do. It'll make life better. Remember, at least one of the networks did go a couple of blocks away and showed you what became of a previous media event for volunteerism. Because that's not the problem. The problem is not graffiti. The problem is not trash. The problem is so much deeper. Well, you see, we have two political camps in this country. One of the political camps blatantly goes after the I don't give a crap crowd and tells them it's okay not to give a crap. And the other political camp blatantly goes after the, oh, somebody should do something crowd. Not me, but somebody. And the fact of the matter is both of them really serve a different master. That's what the third story was. The story that if I went into in any detail would make your eyes spin. The story that if I went into in any detail would make you run across the room and change the channel. Or if you're in your car, risk an accident so you can get to the button. The third story had to do with the Federal Reserve. The third story tells you exactly what's going on in this country today. Precisely what's going on in this country today. I dare say that virtually none of you, if indeed any of you, bothered to read it. It was buried 3 or 4 pages in the business section, and frankly, the story was erroneous. The story was written by some moron reporter who had no idea what the hell he was talking about. The story had to do with, will the Federal Reserve raise interest rates next month? On May 20th, the next time the Federal Open Market Committee meets? Well, we talked to the Federal Reserve, and they said they might, because they have to fight inflation. Oh, we can't have inflation. Oh! And then if you continue to read the story, you notice that whoever they were interviewing at the Federal Reserve continued to interchangeably use the word inflation wages, inflation wages, inflation wages. They weren't talking about the high cost of coffee. The Federal Reserve has no plan whatsoever. You probably don't know this yet. You will soon. The Federal Reserve has no plan whatsoever to fight the bull market in coffee. It's been going on about a month and a half in the futures markets and the wholesale markets. You'll find out about it in a month or 2 or 3 at your grocery store. They're not concerned about that. The Federal Reserve has absolutely no plan whatsoever to fight the bull market in wheat. Well, I know you don't know about that either. It's been going on for about 3 months now. That's not what they're talking about when they say inflation. Same thing, too, by the way, in sugar and chocolate. Wild runaway bull markets. That's not what they're talking about. They're talking about the cost of receptionists. They're talking about the cost of bookkeepers. They're talking about the cost of machinists. They're talking about the cost of bus drivers. They're talking about the cost of... on top of that, they don't really control any interest rates. I told you that before. Sat here with Dick Morris last week. Tuesday night, a week ago tomorrow night. He said the same stupid thing. And I asked him, what interest rates? And of course he avoided the question because he didn't know. And so I asked him specifically, do they set this rate? Do they set that rate? Do they set the other rate? And in one particular case, he actually tried to say they did. And I looked at him straight in the eye, across the table, and said, Dick, one of us doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. And he went on to cite me improved statistics about murder. And I said, Dick, I'm not worried about getting murdered. I'm worried about somebody keying my car, stealing the table off my front porch. What are the statistics on that? And so he cited me other statistics about violent crime. No, I'm not likely to be violently criminalized. I'm worried about that table. That son of a bitch came up my front porch and stole the $3 plastic table. Dick looked at me like I was crazy. Why wasn't I impressed that murder was down? Well, I've never been murdered. I don't plan on being murdered. Where's my goddamn table, Dick? Why is there some asshole out there that'll steal a 10-year-old $3 plastic table, for Christ's sake? What are you going to do about that? Looked at me like I was crazy. Okay. You didn't read that third story, did you? You're hoping against hope I'm not going to go into much more detail on it, aren't you? But there's some moron on one side of the aisle who has you all bent out of shape about partial birth abortions, and there's some moron on the other side of the aisle that is trying to whip you into going and painting graffiti at an abandoned stadium. And both of them serve the people that read that article about the Federal Reserve. That's who they serve. That's who they represent. And both of them, on each side of the political aisle, do their damnedest to tie you up in absolutely meaningless nonsense and crap. And do it very successfully. And for those of you who can't get into painting graffiti in stadiums in Philadelphia, or can't get into partial birth abortions, they have Ellen. It's pretty damn tough to deal with that audience, you know? It's pretty damn tough to deal with that audience. And I said there were two events. First event's terribly personal. Doesn't really affect many of you. It had to do with that silly-ass computer that I'm thinking about buying and not really thinking about buying, that I can't really justify, but oh God, if I could justify it, I'd really be happy to do it. And then finding out that technology is just racing ahead, and the direction it's headed in is entertainment. So if I want to have the latest, fanciest, schmanciest computer, I've got to have the latest, fanciest, schmancy computer that will play the software that will let you cut somebody's head off and make it look like it's real right there on your television screen. But that's where we're headed. It's very depressing. I mean, here we have this incredible tool, this unbelievable tool, and it's becoming a game. It's becoming a toy. It's kind of like television, man. Here was this unbelievable medium that could bring knowledge and wisdom and refinement into your life. Instead, we're playing Ellen. I'm sorry, dudes. That's depressing. It's very, very depressing. It's very depressing that most of you, if you're thinking about the wonderful world of electronics and technology, are thinking about a game. Oh, boy, you'll be able to see the blood and everything. It'd be really great if you have, a 26-dot computer. It'll almost look like it's, pouring out on your table. It'd just be great. Oh, it'd just be fantastic. It'd be fantastic. Won't life really be great? And then we could watch, Ellen, I guess, afterwards on it, because you can get this little card and then that'll bring Ellen right into your computer. That would be really neat. You wouldn't even have to get up and go into the living room. It'll just be so fantastic. And then there's that damn book. Oh, please don't misunderstand. It was a very respectable book for me. Very respectable book for me. It's just that we have this bump in the middle of the day. This big bubble in the middle of the day. Where these two syndicated shows vastly outperform the rest of the radio station. Vastly. I was the first one that noticed it. Programming people said, oh, poo-poo, no, Bob. And then somebody else in the corporate offices that will notice it is going to say, what are you people crazy? What are you people crazy? And then the two realities. Well, let me tell you about the reality that I hadn't told you about yet. It actually happened after the show started. It's actually what triggered this entire monologue, if you will. Guy calls up in the first hour. I mean, I'm sitting in the office when I'm looking at these numbers and I'm joking and I'm saying, well, what the hell, since everybody thinks Lou sounds like Dr. Laura anyway, I'll come on the air today and say I've been lying to you. It is Dr. Laura. She's got better numbers than I do. What the hell? And then a couple of people called up. I think one of them was actually serious, and I think the other two or three were kind of goofing, but one of them I actually think was serious. Thought that it was Dr. Laura. Some of our listeners ain't too swift. But one of the people that was just kind of goofing. Good caller. Kind of call you like to hear on the air. Was on a cell phone. Sounded like he was probably, mid to upper management type of person, somewhere under 40, probably had a couple of bucks in his pocket. Kind of person that you really love to have the clients hear. It's the kind of person you want the clients to think is what the audience consists of. At the end of his conversation, he said words that cut me to the quick. To the absolute quick. Love your show, Bob. I also really like listening to Dr. Laura. I don't mind his listening to Dr. Laura. Glad that he does. Really, I am. I have no problem with Dr. Lara. I can't. Hardly heard her. I have no idea what she's really doing, to tell you the truth. I've only heard clips. Because it just isn't my thing. Doesn't mean it's good, doesn't mean it's bad, doesn't mean it's in between. It simply means it's not my thing. It's not what I listen for. I got enough troubles in my life. I don't have to go out of my way to listen to somebody else's, and especially when they're things I can't even begin to identify with. If I could at least identify with them, I mean, if she had a whole bunch of 50-year-old men who had talk shows and lifelong dreams of beating the market and sitting quietly in their little rooms and cornering corn and that kind of stuff, I can get into that. Hello, Dr. Lara. Oh, Jesus, I got this really bad position in corn, you know? Oh, God. No, it's corn futures, honey. There's nothing wrong with my toe. No, it's... I could probably get into that. Now, he said he liked to listen to Dr. Lara, not call Dr. Lara. People like to listen to Rush Limbaugh. Virtually nobody calls him. People like to listen to Dr. Adele. People like to listen to Gordon. People like to listen to... And the list is quite long. And it's getting longer every single day. And you know, the incredible thing is, they are not entertainers. They are not particularly learned people. They're not people who really have anything to say. They are infamous people. And a number of them have already come and gone. That's okay. There are lots of infamous people. And you're going to hear a lot more of them. Cato Kalin's the prime example of one that's already come and gone. Yes, he had a talk show in Los Angeles, and for a book or two it actually got numbers, good numbers. Until he had finally said, well, I had a cheeseburger and OJ had, for the umpteenth time. But you see, the program wasn't aimed at listeners like you. No. The program was aimed at young airheads who don't listen to talk radio. And so if they only lasted for 2 books, that's okay. We'll find something else after those 2 books are over. And after you listen to Dick tell you that murder's down 16.1%, as many times as you can take it, and that he's in a 12-step program, but he can't tell you what it is, although it has to do with a sex addiction, and you can't take it anymore, that's okay. There are lots of other assholes out there. Because they don't challenge you, and they don't require you to be part of the show. One of the astonishing things of those 4 days that he did, so you don't have the benefit of having seen or listened to that videotape of his speech at the NAB. One of the astonishing things is that all he said in his speech at the NAB is all he said to you. Only he stretched it out for 12 hours instead of 1. That's all the material he has. That's okay. That's okay. Do you know why it's okay? Because by and large, it's all the material the audience cares to digest.
Heart talk, moonlight walk, receiving money by mail, a fireplace with a
27 minutes after the hour of 8 o'clock.
Larson, weekday mornings at 9 on 970 WFLA.
So anyway, I don't want to mention any names here, but we have a young person on staff here who wants desperately to be a talk show host because he thinks it's about the neatest thing in the entire world, and it really is. And I come out of the office today after seeing the numbers, and keep in mind, I didn't have a bad book. I had a very respectable book. I'm used to great books, and it wasn't a great book. It was a respectable book. And I can live with respectable books. That's no problem. But I come out of the office, and I'm nine shades of gray. Because I see the handwriting on the wall. I mean, it's painted with a big broad brush and underlined and with sparkles on it and everything else so that you can't miss it. And this young person who wants desperately to be a talk show host doesn't quite understand what the problem is. Well, he doesn't know any presidents. I don't think he makes enough money to, be with hookers. And he can't buy a call to save his soul. And he can't figure out why. It's because the industry is changing. It's because the format is changing. And when explained to him, he turned 12 shades of gray. So whose fault is this? And by the way, do I disagree with any of it? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm just sad. Me, personally, I'm probably okay. I have a damn good contract, and I'm, reasonably safe for 2.5 years. Sure, they can blow me out tomorrow, but they still got to pay me. What the hell? Do you think I care? This isn't that big of an ego trip. It's what I do for a living. As long as I get the money, I don't care. It's the future, dude. Just makes me kind of sad. Makes me kind of sad. It's everything I read in the newspaper today. It's everything that I heard today. It's everything that happened in my life today. I just don't like it. I don't like it because people will do nothing. Absolutely nothing to make their lives better. Regardless of what it is. The radio format they like. Their finances. Their future. Their kids. Nothing. And more people are catching on to that. And more people are taking advantage of that. And more people are finding ways to profit on it.